Hey, it's Tropical Talk Radio. It's the Magic Hour, Friday night. Happy hour, everybody. What do you say we hit the tunes?
Yeah, buddy, you've downloaded Tropical Talk Radio, where we talk about all things entrepreneurship, travel, and lifestyle. If you're interested in more about this program, check out tropicalmba.com. And if you sign up for our mailing list, I will personally send you 50 free podcast episodes that take you along on our journey and expose the insider story on how we started a $1 million honest-to-goodness product business while we traveled the globe.
Hey, thank you so much for joining me. This is Tropical Talk Radio, fourth dimensional copywriting and why keyword research is dead. Today we are going to talk about a getting started script. How do you get started when you just got an idea, you got a job, you got a family? How do you get started on the side with an internet business? We are going to talk about the number one thing that copywriters don't talk about. And it's interesting because almost every successful copywriter that I know about them because of this one thing that they're not talking about. So it's that distinction that MJ DeMarco makes. It's like a lot of people in the fast lane tell people to become successful by going in the slow lane. So we're going to talk about what that is and why that's the fourth dimension of copywriting. And we are going to go over some keyword research and SEO stuff. All right, let's get started. This is going to be a quick one, some quick audio adrenaline to get you started on your weekend. Matt writes to me and says, look, I'm 38. I live in the UK. Here's the thing. I have very little capital to invest and my salary isn't that big. So I want to get started on the side with entrepreneurship and I'm not going to be able to invest a ton of money into it. So I want to know the best way to start taking these steps out the door, Dan. I've set up a website and I've got the basic skills. I know how the basics work. So how do you get started? I think a lot of your listeners would want to hear about this kind of thing. Well, cheers, Matt. I think you're probably right. So the problem, of course, with this question is twofold. It's very difficult to answer both from my end and from your end. I understand that. It's like there's tons of information out there on the internet. How do you even get started with the business? So I'm just going to pull some basic lessons that I'm seeing because I've been in a cool position where I've met hundreds of people who are making these incomes as creative internet entrepreneurs, making great incomes, living wherever they want in the world. So the first thing I would say to you, Matt, is understand what you're getting yourself into. The picture of the person who puts up a website on the side and then, it just so happens that I'm making $2,000 a month and that's like great amount of gravy for me and my family. I don't see that a lot. And I know that I have a self-selecting audience. So I want you, if you can find that, go find that crowd and hang out with them. But I don't know those people. Here's the whole thing about this entrepreneurial revolution. If you want to get involved in it, it's going to quickly force your hand. If it were the case that you put up an affiliate website that was making you $2,000 a month, I can guarantee you this. It's not going to be making you $2,000 a month 2 years from that afterwards if you don't put some energy into it. So this is what I mean by it's going to be forcing your hand because, so what happens if you want to spend your full-time energy on that $2,000 cash flow? Well, maybe you have to hire somebody. So there goes $600, $700 of it. And maybe you have to start working less at your job and more into that. So all of a sudden, that $2,000 in profit turns into nothing, right? So it's going to force your hand to go full-time and broke, as I call it, if you really want to build something that's going to be long-term and sustainable. And that's really the issue here is I think people miss out on the time element here. So one of the recommendations I give to people is I think you got to get a job. Especially if you're at square one, it's just not good enough to know how to put up websites. You got to know how to cut deals, negotiate reality, build businesses, and that's stuff you learn by working a business class job. Ideally, working with an entrepreneur who has less than 10 employees to get a lot of face time. The cool thing about working for an entrepreneur and why I'm so bullish about it is you get paid for your education. I mean, it's not unreasonable to suspect that this could take you 1 to 2 years. I'll tell you a story about Taylor, actually, the guy who's putting up this podcast right now. When I first spoke to Taylor, he had all of the basics down. And he really wanted to live this lifestyle and be an expat, but he hadn't worked yet for an organization that was implementing these skills. And so he didn't have that firsthand experience that was so critical to getting businesses off the ground. And that's one of the reasons I was just so impressed by Taylor is that he took that advice, moved away from At the time, for him, it was a comfortable lifestyle, I'm assuming, living overseas in a cool environment, and went to a less comfortable environment, a new one, challenged himself to work for an entrepreneurial organization. And when I talked to him during a second job interview a year later, it was like talking to a new man. He could speak my language. I knew that he understood what I was saying to him. He gave me great feedback on what I was saying. And maybe that's another way to look at it, Matt, is could you sit in the war room with a small business and contribute to the conversation? If you can't contribute to that conversation, it's going to be very difficult to organize that own, a business on your own that really requires those types of conversations. So that's something to ask yourself. Do you have that broader skill set of being an entrepreneur? That's behind these successful websites. So that's combined with get used to the time and financial sacrifice. And then one other thing, Matt, that I wanted to address in your email is a lot of what you were talking about was focused on research, keyword research, and SEO. And I understand why people gravitate to that because it's a really simple way to get started, right? It's like, can I find a high volume keyword with low competition? So the problem with this kind of approach, Matt, is that it doesn't pass what I call the on-stage test. So I think in order to be successful long-term with the business, you need to see yourself on stage at the industry-leading conference in 5 years. So if your keyword research doesn't point you to a keyword that you're willing to be on stage for, then it doesn't matter. Because here's the thing, SEO is just one way to distribute a product amongst hundreds, and many more powerful than SEO, by the way. And I'll tell you this, Matt, for a lot of my product keywords, hardly any SEO results on the first page. For one of them, there's only one result. In fact, the rest of the results are all paid traffic. Something else to think about. If you do love SEO and keyword research, I'm not saying that you can't build a living off of that. A lot of people do, but they're not in the business of those keywords that they're identifying. They're in the business of identifying keywords. And so examples of that would be domain appraisers or the Adsense Flippers or affiliate marketers, people that are full-time, that build processes around spreadsheets, number crunching, traffic arbitrage, and stuff like that. So the whole idea here, Matt, is to do the thought exercise of thinking really long term and pushing yourself down the value chain. If you're going to start a business based on keywords and research, and that's what you want to get good at, then double down on that. If you find something that's really cool, like baby diapers, and you see yourself on stage in that industry in 5 years from now, go down that route. And just as a final icing topping, so I know that these aren't maybe not giving you more clarity, but hopefully giving you just a little bit of perspective as to how I'd look at it. The final thing to get started is look what other people are having success with, Really look behind the scenes of who's making money out there doing things that you enjoy. And are there ways that you could model that, reposition it, and do it with your own personal, unique flair and have some success on your own? Matt, let me know how it goes, man. And thank you so much for listening to this podcast. David writes me, he says, "Hey Dan, while overseas, do you miss anything from back home at all, like Thanksgiving, Christmas, Walmart, or whatever?" That's kind of an interesting question, David. I haven't thought about it in a while. And the answer is no. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. Venkat wrote in a post at Ribbon Farm last week that he doesn't have the personality for missing. And there's different types of personalities. And I don't think I'm a big misser. I do have a nostalgic part of me, and I love going back to the United States and sort of going to the places I used to go and driving down the roads I used to drive. But I don't really miss actively the United States. And I think part of it is that I lived there for 26 years. And although I love to try to psychoanalyze myself, I think it's pretty simple. Even though the U.S. is this incredibly geographically diverse place, and it probably is my favorite country that I've ever been to. I love the fact that everybody can be an American. I think that's one of the coolest things about America. I love what's on offer there. It's an amazing place. But 26 years is a really long time to spend in one place, especially for a Rolling Stone like me. The other thing that's interesting about the United States that seems to be true to me and might be, I don't know if it's surprising to foreigners or whatever, but it's amazingly culturally consistent. To me, there's not that much difference to living in Austin, to San Diego, to Los Angeles, to Brooklyn, to Gainesville, to central Pennsylvania. I mean, there are differences, but it's not nearly as different as living in Thailand to living in the Philippines from the way that I live and from my perspective. So that's my answer to that question. David, and you had one more question, which is, if you want to sell a product on one website, you just have one product, one website, what's the best platform to go with? I would go with a WordPress website connected with PayPal. You had Shopify or Ning there. Only would use Ning if you're planning on a forum-based content approach. If you want to have an open forum on the internet, Ning might work. You really got to make a decision whether the content's going to be coming from you or coming from your community. With Shopify, I would not go to Shopify until you've got over 25 products, really. And even then, you're going to want to look at it and weigh some factors. We're using WooCommerce for all of our e-commerce now, and we're absolutely loving it. All right, we got through 2 questions. We got one more person who sent me an email this week, Dan at tropicalmba.com. I hope you guys are already getting pumped to just to blow it out this weekend. All your friends are going to be blowing it out at the bar. You're going to be blowing it out at the laptop. Let me know how that goes. All right, Toffler writes, speaking of blowing it out, I've been at it for about 7 weeks now, and my site just hasn't taken off, so I'm hoping you can help me. I'm not going to link to Toffler's sites here, but I am going to speak directly to her issues, because here's what she says, and I love this. All of my sales, except for a couple, have come from people that I have personal relationships with, but that's not scalable. So basically, Toffler asked me a lot of questions about advertising and copywriting and how can she increase her conversions. Well, first off, Toffler, you've been at it for 7 weeks, and I love your entrepreneurial insistence. Because 7 weeks is if you're making a couple sales, that's great. And if you're making sales based off of personal relationships, even better. 7 weeks is not a long time to get, this stuff takes a long time to get traction. But let's talk about some ways that you can get that going. So here's the thing. I disagree with you fundamentally about one thing, which is that relationships don't scale. That's not true. Relationships do scale. What I want you to do is look at those people that are buying from you and ask yourself the question, what are the principles that underlay your relationship with them that convince them to buy this tea? I think that this is a very fascinating thing that does scale. It scales through this podcast, for example. Right now, I'm talking to a couple thousand people rather than one person across the table, but I'm trying to bring those same principles to play in this format. There's one thing about copywriting that I think is kind of BS, and Ian Borders helped to bring this out because he's at our event in Bangkok. He's a conversion specialist, and he said 80% of conversion analysis really comes down to your relationship with your customers. So what that tells me is things like sales page layout and branding and conversion and all this stuff is really the 20%. And your experience bears that out as well, Toffler. You're saying that most of your sales are coming through personal relationships. Well, I got to tell you, that's how almost all of my sales come from. And that's why the 7 weeks thing makes a lot of sense. You're just getting started building these relationships. So I want you to look at those relationships. And so here's the 4th dimension of copywriting for those of you looking at that. You've got width, you've got length, you've got depth of the content, how interesting is the content. But here's the most important part, time. How is your relationship building with your users over time? Even when it comes to mediums like advertising and PPC, Toffler, we're noticing on our campaigns that people aren't buying on the first time. That's why our remarketing, by the way, campaigns have been so successful. For those of you that don't know what remarketing is, it's like if you've ever gone to my portable bar company website and then I follow you around on the internet like a jerk for the next 2 weeks, that's remarketing. And that really does work. In fact, it even worked on me today when I visited this is a smart idea, by the way. I visited the landing page of a new author's website, and because I really liked this blog post. And he had this book. And I was like, well, yeah, it was one blog post. I'm not really ready to buy this guy's book yet, right? But he had a remarketing campaign on that book. And I've been seeing that book I've probably seen it like 4 or 5 times now going on related websites that have Google AdSense. And it's not going to take me a couple more times until maybe I see that ad a few more times and then I've subscribed to his blog. So I see 1 or 2 more blog posts and boom, I'm a customer. I'm on his customer list now. And that's the 4th dimension of copywriting. Guys that have that time relationship and gals that have that time relationship with their audience, at the end of the day, they don't really need a sales letter. They can just say, here's what I'm offering. Do you want it? And then a sales letter at that point is the 20% conversion. So the first 3 dimensions of copywriting are pale in comparison to the 4th dimension, which is how is your relationship evolving with people over the course of time? So what are some things that you could do with your tea business? You could add audio elements like this. You could add video elements on your site so you engage people for a long period of time. I actually don't think your sales letter is long enough for somebody coming there cold. I really want an educational experience. You could add a course. You're trying to solve problems with products, right? So that, really you're not a tea company. You're a company that solves, in one case, you're trying to position it as a weight loss product. So you're solving an important problem with a unique solution. That's a niche. That's good. So you need things that are building relationship, like audio courses, like autoresponders, where people, look at what we're doing with the Tropical MBA crash course. That's a way that we can talk with people over time. And hey, here's the other thing, Toffler. You're going to have to work harder than we're working at Tropical MBA because people know us over there. And, we're actually working on improving that right now so that when you take the course, it's actually going to be like a university. And I think that that's going to really increase the buying temperature of people because we're going to educate them as to why the product is important. So if you're saying, all right, look, I don't want to build a whole podcast around this, I just want some more solid advice. Here's a couple quick things. I think your product needs a better hook. It needs to be more expensive so you can charge for all of this stuff. And you need something that's really going to stick in people's minds. And this is a good lesson for anybody out there with a product. You can't just be in the middle as the upstart. If you're going to get up the steep climb, right, to launch a new product, you're going to need to really clinch into that mountain face. You're going to need a hard angle. And, I think your product should be outlandish in one way or the other. I mean, it should be this incredibly expensive tea. It should be this incredible miracle tea. It should be this tea that's super focused on education. It's over the top. If it's just going to be like the next tea that's in the middle, you're going to get lost. And so that's why I think find a way to move your product to the edge. And then as you develop cash flow for a business, it'll gradually come into the middle of the marketplace with maybe more broader product offerings, maybe lower margin products that can be sold to more people, like the $8 tea packet or whatever. But at the beginning, think of any way you can to push that tea to the very edge of the market. So happy tea for, neural, wellness or whatever, that's $14 is pretty much what's out there. Whereas if it's like tea for people who want to take the SAT exam and it's going to nuke out their brain and make them super smart, now that's going to have a better chance of establishing a new relationship with a new target audience. And why do we get confused with these middle of the road products? Well, you still need a time element and a relationship element, but traditionally they've been sold through traditional retailers. So if you were to develop a relationship with Whole Foods or with Amazon.com, sure, maybe middle of the road products could work, but keep in mind you're building a relationship with the retailers, not with the end users. In order to get to the end users, you're going to need this incredibly unique value proposition, and that's going to give you more margin for those remarketing campaigns, which you're going to start running. Well, anyway, thank you everybody for sending me an email. This has been Tropical Talk Radio. If you want to find out more, check out my website, tropicalmba.com. I'll see you next Friday afternoon.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening. Don't be shy. We've got a mailing list. Check it out at tropicalmba.com. Get yourself signed up and we'll keep you up to date on everything we do, plus give you those 50 free podcast episodes. If you want to say, hey, check me out on Twitter at tropicalmba. We'll see you soon.